cue us to press. All right, so we'll go into some detail about pressing in the first few slides, and then as usual we'll look at some video clips. We'll basically look at one video clip for each type of pressing. All right, and if we have time, we have some random ones at the end that we can look at, but we'll just get through these first ones. So, let's see here. All right, so game principles: defending. Just basically overview what is defending. We want to deny the most dangerous spaces the opponents can use or exploit. We want to predictable areas and apply the maximum individual and collective pressure we're able to in that moment to try to regain possession. Yes, we do want to stop the opponent from scoring goal, but at the end of the day, we want to get the ball back. If we defend really well for 70, 80, 90 minutes, whatever you play, but we never have the ball, that's not a very fun soccer game. So when we defend, our purpose should be to get the ball back. Again, we want to stop them from scoring, but if we can win the ball back, it's going to be really difficult for them to score goals. All right, so principles. All right, pressure. Again, when we break down defending, there's a lot that goes into it, but this is it. Pressure. Okay, we need to affect the ball carrier. All right, we need to make them do something. All right, particularly what we would like them to do, and we need to give them the least amount of time and space available. All right, think about it from your perspective. When you have the ball, the more time and space you have, the more you enjoy the game, the more things you can do. The less time and space you have, the more difficult the game becomes. All right, we want to force, all right, play. We want to channel it to a certain area of the field, predictable areas where we as a team know it's going to go or where it should go, all right, and preferably to the smallest area possible. All right, if we give them the entire field to play, then it makes it harder for us to defend. If we can funnel them into a 10 by 10 area, then obviously it makes it much easier for us and much more difficult for them. And then we want to deny, all right? We want to make sure that we eliminate the dangerous spaces that allow them to go to goal, all right? To either have a chance to goal or at least put us under a lot of pressure where we need to defend. So again, when we get down to defending, it's about those things. It's about putting pressure on the ball. It's about making it go where we want to go. And then once we get it there, denying them the opportunity to get towards goal, all right? So our objectives are, again, can we win the ball back? Can we destroy the play, tackle, dispossess them? We don't win it back, but they don't have the ball either. All right. We force them into the predictable areas. All right. And can we be secure? Can we reduce the amount of dangerous space the opponent can play to? We do that by either shrinking the space closest to the ball. All right. If we can get maximum pressure there, we do that, which is what we're going to talk about for the most part today in pressing. We want to deny space closer to our goal. All right. If we cannot get that maximal pressure. So our defending team tasks, all right, immediate pressure to the ball, okay, create numbers up, squeeze and make the area as small as possible, the least number of available lanes for them to get out of, all right? And then when we make the ball go into those areas, we want to make sure that we swarm and get numbers to that area with the purpose of winning the ball. We've all seen either as on either side, either in the positive side of this or the negative side of this, one player has the ball, there's 2, 3, 4 players around them defending, and the one player finds a way to get out of that, and the 4 players are left there standing, wondering how the heck they let that player out of that position. So we need to make sure that we're collectively moving, all right, to maintain compactness. We can't have gaps. One player's not doing their job and gives the opponent a gap, then they're going to be able to break that press. All right, we want to keep the ball in front of as many lines as possible, as many of our players as possible, and we want to, again, keep it into the small area. We want to deny the switch. All right, yes, the other team might move the ball around in an effort to get it out of there, out of that smaller space area, but we need to, at the minimum, deny that opportunity. All right, and then we need to make sure that we position ourselves to ensure security if the press is unsuccessful. So if they go backward and they find a central defender with time and space, or the goalkeeper with time and space, or a holding midfielder with time and space who can go to another area of the field where we have less players, then we need to be able to quickly reorganize so that it does not become a bigger problem for us. Is it the end of the world that we were not able to successfully press them? No, probably not. All right. If we are able to make sure that we have players in position and we organize ourselves or reorganize ourselves if the ball should go to one of those areas or to one of those players. And the reorganization of team shape if the press is unsuccessful. So again, we've all got to move into position. If we've got them pressed on the right flank, all right, and they are able to switch it all the way over to the left flank, then we have to make sure that we are reorganizing, all right, and moving so that we can deny them the ability to go forward. So defending, player task, again, this is all related to pressing, all right? So are these generally true when we defend? Yes, but when we're specifically talking about pressing, all right, these apply as well. So the speed, angle, and distance of the primary pressure, or the first defender, all right, or the pressure defender, whatever your coaches happen to call it, all right, we're going to as close as possible, all right, without losing the ability to force them, all right. In other words, we do not want to run by them, all right. Putting pressure on a player and then running past them as they dribble by us is not effective pressure, all right. The other players, so cover balance, all right. Second defender, third defender, again, depending on what your coach might call those players, but they need to make sure that they're looking for opportunities to double team the ball if possible, or if the first defender is forcing play into a predictable area, we want the ball to go into that area. If we go and stand in that area as the second or third defender, secondary support defenders, cover balance defenders, again, whatever your coach calls it, if we go stand in those areas before the ball arrives, the players with the ball is probably not going to play it there. So we want to encourage the pass to go there, and as it travels, then we can go close the ball down, all right, and make sure that we reorganize in that situation. Closest supporting defenders are moving, all right, to make sure that they shrink the space. All right, again, we want to make sure that they only have one, maybe two options to play the ball, and we know where those options are. And then we want the ball to go there so that we can either intercept it as the ball is traveling there, or at the very least put pressure on or destroy the play with the tackle when it is played there. So those closest to players who are not pressuring the ball still need to be reading the play and making sure that they know where the ball is going next and then what they're going to do when it is played there. Players who are further away from the ball, all right, they need to make sure that they're still providing us with safety and security. All right, if on the boys' side, Coach Tony, Coach England calls it the safety player. All right, these players are maybe weak side fullback. All right, making sure that the opponent can't play a big diagonal ball to the other side of the field. And if for some reason they make an amazing play or we make a mistake defensively that allows that ball, we still have somebody in a position that can help us deal with that. All right, to either break up the play or slow it down and allow us to reorganize as we talked about in that earlier slide. So we still must have all those players around, and those players, just because they're not in the immediate area where the ball is at, doesn't mean that they can kind of just switch off, all right, and chill out and not have to worry about anything. They need to make sure they're thinking about the worst case scenario, all right, and what if the press doesn't work and I now have to defend in a different area of the field. So player tasks, again, we need to win individual battles, all right. We need to have a clarity of action. Again, what is my purpose in defending? Am I going to close the ball down to win it? Am I going to close down to tackle it or dispossess the player? Am I going to try to just direct them one way, or am I only able to deny them penetration? All right. So I have to have a clear purpose of action, all right, when I'm doing this. For the most part in pressing, we would only be dealing with regain, destroy, or direct the ball carrier. Denying penetration and dropping off, we would be out of a pressing moment at that stage, and we would be into a different phase of defending. All right. So generally speaking, we're only going to deal with the first three when we speak about pressing. All right. Again, positioning off the ball, not the pressure defender, the second defender, third defender, or secondary and supporting defenders. They are encouraging passes into those predictable areas, and then they are acting when the ball is played there. All right. So we want to make it go into those predictable areas, and then we want to act. And then we want to double team the ball whenever possible. Oftentimes you'll see in the clips the primary defender, the primary pressure defender, or first defender, pressure defender, their job is to not win the ball. All right. If they do, but many times their job is to just make that play predictable, force it to where we want to go as a team. And then the second or cover defender, secondary pressure, again, whatever we want to call it, that defender is the one who actually wins the ball, or another defender, because the ball carrier runs out of space or runs out of options, or just makes a really rash play you know, a panicky play and gives us the ball. So we want to make sure that those players around the ball are looking to double or triple team the ball, because those are often the players who are going to win the ball. So we want to make sure we define pressure versus pressing. All right, these are two very different things. They're related, I should say, but they're different. So pressure is simply resistance to an opponent in possession, meaning we have players defending between the ball and the goal. All right, the more players, the better, obviously. The better organized they are, the better. All right, but we don't have to do anything. We just literally, like the bare essence of pressure is standing between the ball and the goal that we are defending. All right, so we can pressure a team without pressing them. So it's a quick little clip. You'll notice the team, this is US U15 girls against the Mexico 15 girls. And you'll see Mexico's applying pressure, all right, and it's higher up the field, but they're not necessarily pressing. There's not an urgency for them to win the ball back. All right, so we'll just go through this real quick. So again, you can see players from Mexico around the ball. They're trying to affect the play, all right, but they're not, there's no overwhelming, like right there, there's not a desire to necessarily go win the ball because we're pressing, all right. So this would be pressure, all right. They're making it more difficult for the U.S. to go forward, all right, but they're not necessarily pressing. So when we talk about pressing, pressing is a specific use of pressure to regain the ball quickly and usually as close to the goal that we are attacking as possible. So we want to win it back as soon as possible, and we want to win it as high up the field, as close to the goal that we're scoring on as possible. So if we look here at this, all right, this is LA Galaxy and Solar from Texas, U17 boys, U16, 17 boys, and you see the difference.
Edwards making his 29th appearance of the season in goal, and has started every game in these playoffs for Solar. As Sparks runs.
They destroyed the play. They didn't regain, well, they did regain possession, but they did it through destroying the play, dispossessing the player. So you see the difference in the urgency level, all right, between pressing and pressure. So why do we want to press? All right, well, because it's cool, because that's what Liverpool does and Klopp does, and that's what Guardiola has done at Barcelona and at Bayern, and now at that other club that's kicked out of the Champions League. I can't remember their name right now. Anyway, so why are we pressing? All right, we want to win the ball as close to the goal that we're attacking. The less distance we have to cover, then the easier it might be for us to score a goal. All right, so most goals originate from winning the ball in our attacking half than anywhere else on the field. All right, in general in the game, if you can win the ball on your half of the field, you will score more goals on that from winning the ball from that half of the field than if you win it in your defending half of the field. All right, and obviously a byproduct of that is we keep further away from the goal we are defending. We make it more difficult. We make them travel much further with a higher level of pressure to try to score a goal. All right. And if we are successful in winning the ball, typically the team that we, the opponent, typically they are in a phase of trying to organize to build and play forward. So they tend to be spread out, all right, vertically and horizontally. That means there's gaps for us to attack. So when we can win it, they are more disorganized defensively, all right, leaving us more space and more time to go forward to that goal that is closer to us because we want it higher up the field. So those are the first three, all right. We can dominate a game mentally and physically, all right. Mentally, if you think about it, we've all been there. We've all been in a game where we just cannot get the ball out of our own end, or sometimes it feels like we can't even get it out of our own penalty area, all right, without it, we're losing it right away. That takes a toll on you mentally, all right? And then physically, you just feel more confident, all right? You tend to be more aggressive, all right? If mentally your confidence is low, then the way that you act physically starts to be affected as well, all right? So it can rattle the opponent, all right? And it can give us a lot of confidence. Game situation or conditions. For instance, if you're playing on a bumpy field and you have a team that is trying to play out of the back, you might want to test how good they are at playing out of the back. A turf field, some teams are really comfortable on turf. If you happen to know that your opponent does not play on turf very often, then that might be something to try, because obviously it's just a different speed. We're very used to the turf, training in the dome all the time. But for other teams that you play, especially if you travel a different area of the country, they might not ever play on turf. So it might be different for them, and it might be something worth trying. Again, maybe it's rainy and it's difficult. The ball's wet. It's slippery. So there's different things like that that may or may not dictate. Maybe we're losing the game and we need a goal back, so we need to try to win the ball earlier and try to generate that goal somehow. So we want to press and keep them under pressure. All right. And then again, you'll see this a lot. Many teams just aren't prepared.
Seventh graders. There's no sign.
All right. They're just not ready for it. All right. They might think they play out of the back, but they have I call them checklist teams. All right. They have a pattern that they use to play out of the back, and it's successful most of the time. But if we can disrupt that, they don't really have a plan B. So obviously, again, it goes back to that mental aspect of it. If the team is like, wait a minute, this usually works, and now we can't get it out, we don't really know what else to do, then it gives you an advantage. Now, challenges. So we just made pressing sound really easy, and why wouldn't you do it if those are all the advantages or the purposes to it? There's challenges. It requires excellent team fitness. All right, again, I said if one player leaves us a gap, all right, that the other team can exploit, then we might be in big trouble. All right, because obviously we're committing a lot of players to a certain area of the field, all right, high up the field. If they're able to break that pressure, then they might end up with a lot of numbers going forward against very few numbers for us, and that obviously is a big deal for them. So our fitness has to be really, really high. It requires some team depth as well. All right, if we're going to try to press for 90 minutes, then we're going to need players who can come off the bench, all right, and help us out. We can't expect the starting 11 or the starting 10 field players to constantly be pressing all of the time. So especially if we're playing in a weekend, we're playing 2 or 3 games in a showcase or a tournament or whatever. So it's going to require some depth, all right? And it requires an aggressive mentality from every player. So if our team is not, if they're a little bit more passive, or if they're a little bit lacking in confidence, then pressing could be an issue. And again, it can't just be, well, we've got 4 or 5 players who are really committed to pressing. All right, then we've got 3 or 4 who are usually pretty good at it. And then we've got a couple who really don't like it. Everybody's got to have the mentality that, yes, this is what we're doing. This is how we're defending. And this is what I have to do within that for the team to be successful. So more challenges, again, coordinated purposeful movement. All 11 players, even your goalkeeper needs to be involved in it, because if your back line presses if we get good pressure to the ball and everybody squeezes up, including our back line, that leaves a lot of space between the back line and the goal that we're defending. And sometimes we'll see teams play a long early ball in behind and try to catch us. If you can have a goalkeeper who's aggressive and plays off their line and can deal with that, then that shuts down that avenue of attack for the opponent. So we need everybody to be coordinated and moving, everybody switched on. The opponent quality. So we said test a team to see if they're good. Maybe they're really, really good at playing out of the back. Maybe they're a pretty sophisticated group, very talented group. They've been playing together for a while, and the pressure doesn't really bother them that much. So you don't have a mental advantage. In fact, they love it. All right, they love that you're doing that. So I've seen the opposite, where teams who are really, really good at possession are used to teams pressing them, and they're very comfortable in it. And if you go the opposite route and you just kind of sit in on them, they don't know how to break that down. They're not used to a team kind of like sitting in a mid-block or even kind of bunkering closer to their goal a little bit. They don't have any answers for that because they don't see that. So that could be a challenge for us. If you run up against a team who's really good at unlocking that press, then you might need to try something different and kind of go against what you normally would prefer to do. All right, and then again, game situation. If we're winning 1-0 in a big game, like, do we really need to risk pressing? If it's working really well, there's nothing wrong with it. But at certain times, maybe not. If you're playing your 3rd game in 3 days, is pressing for the entire game the best strategy? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe if you're super fit, you're okay. Maybe if the other team's way less fit than you, then you're okay. But, you know, if it's your third game and it happens to be the summertime and 95 degrees outside, then maybe pressing for the entire game or even for a significant portion of it might not be the best scenario. So, so again, those game situations and conditions can factor into it as well. So types of pressing. We've got direct pressing. All right, and this is what we see immediately after we're pressing. All right, so we saw that example of pressing where the goalkeeper rolled it out. Immediately a player was going to the ball carrier to put him under pressure and force him one way. All right. What we'll see a lot more of probably is indirect pressing, and that is there might be some immediate pressure on the ball, but they're not necessarily going to win it. What they're doing is just directing it into an area. All right, and they might allow the team to shift the ball around from side to side a little bit before they decide, oh, we're going to go now. We'll see a clip of this a little bit later. You know, so a team they know when they want to press. Typically, their trigger is the ball goes to a certain player or it goes into a certain area of the field before they start pressing. Other teams, just as soon as the ball's played, we're going to put press. That's the direct pressing. Indirect pressing is probably what you'll see more often. And then the third type, which is what I think most people would probably like most immediately assume of pressing, and that is counter pressing, or if you prefer the German, gegenpressing. So that would be, it's a specific moment. All right, it is pressing, but it only happens. It happens immediately when we are in possession of the ball, immediately after we lose possession of the ball. All right, so we're not saying if the goalkeeper starts with the ball, their goalkeeper starts with the ball on a goal kick, we are not counter pressing at that point. That's just, we're starting from a direct or indirect press. If we have the ball and we play a poor pass and it goes directly to one of our opponents and we're pressing, now we are counter pressing. All right, so we're going to mostly look at the triggers for direct and indirect pressing. Counter pressing would be an entirely different webinar, primarily because when we think about counter pressing, there are 4 different styles or strategies that you use when counter pressing. So we could probably spend 15-20 minutes on each one of those. So we're not going to do that today, but counter pressing is definitely what you're probably most used to in terms of pressing. So the strategy, we want to dictate the game without the ball. We want to force it into predictable or trigger areas. We want to get numbers around it to squeeze the space and make it smaller. We want to win our individual duels, and then we want to deny penetration outside of the pressing area. All right, so there might be passes that are connected within our pressing area, and we can live with those, but we want to make sure that we keep them in that area of the field so that we can eventually win the ball back. So triggers, all right, so now we're into it. All right, so what prompts us? So we can't just go willy-nilly running around the field. Well, we can go just running around the field, just chasing the ball whenever it's played. But that's probably not going to be an effective strategy for very long. All right, so the first one is a weak or an inaccurate pass by an opponent. All right, so they have the ball and they play a poor pass. So we look at this. This is Brazil, Mexico from the U20 World Cup. All right. And we'll just look. So Brazil's got the ball. And you see this pass to the player. It's soft and it's not accurate. So this is going to allow an immediate pressing moment from the Mexico defender to step and win the ball. They recognize that pass and they know immediately, I have to go and step. You saw before the pass even arrived, okay, to the Brazilian player, okay, before that player, she sees this pass right now. She can see that it's not going to be played directly into her, so she's going to take off and start to press her. All right, so this would be a weak pass. So it's something that we're looking for. That's going to trigger us. I'm the closest player to the ball. I know I need to step in this moment because that pass is crap. So I've got to take advantage. All right. So pressing trigger number 2. The pass is in the air. All right. Particularly when it is high in the air. So it's not a driven pass. It's kind of a looping ball in the air. Okay. Or it's bouncing, all right, into the player who's trying to receive it. All right. And then another one is the distance of the pass invites pressure. So we're going to encapsulate one clip with 2 of these. So again, we look at this. Oh, ball's in the air. All right, or the distance invites the pressure. So it's a really long pass, and it could be in the air or it could be on the ground. Most of the time, that pass is probably going to be in the air, but there could be a longer pass on the ground that invites pressure. So we can see the ball right here. All right, center back has it. All right, you want to remember this guy on the ball right now. Again, you're going to see him later. All right, he's Nate's special friend. All right, so see the ball. See how high that ball is in the air. All right, okay, so it's switched. Okay, it's over a pretty long distance. All right, so that's going to be a cue for this player centrally. Watch his run. He's not jogging. He is on a full-on sprint because that pass was in the air and it was over a pretty long distance. And now you can see, because he's made that effort to press that player and make him play quickly, all right, they've got a 6v4 advantage in the middle of the field, all right, and they win the ball. So that would be a destroy the play. He gets fouled, all right. They win the ball back, but they didn't necessarily win possession. But that ball in the air was the trigger, and you saw how quickly that player sprinted to get to the ball when he noticed how high that ball was played in the air and how long over the length of the distance of that pass as well. All right. So poor body orientation, all right, of the player receiving the pass. All right. So that player is not facing forward. They're facing their own goal, or they're facing the touch line. All right. This is another thing that when we see it and our team is going to press, all right, then this is a trigger for us. The entire team. It's not just the closest player to the ball, all right, because if the closest player to the ball goes and presses, the team just stands around, all right, then it's not going to work very well. So everybody's got to notice this, all right? Everybody's responsibility in terms of what they do next is different, but we all have to recognize it. So we go back to that idea that one of the challenges of this is that all 11 players are committed to it, and they're all acting collectively. All right. So we see this. This is just off a free kick. All right. So this would be indirect pressing. They're putting pressure, but they're not really pressing. All right. Now he can see this player is going to receive the ball. His shoulders are square, so he reads the cue and starts to go. All right. And then that causes a bad touch from the player. All right. And we can see very active in trying to win that ball back now. All right. Again, a player is not receiving the ball, so they're able to squeeze up. I wouldn't necessarily call that a pressing moment, but you notice they put some more pressure on that player. So just again, real quick, we'll just play the first part. So they're not pressing, all right? If they're doing anything, it's indirect pressing. They're trying to squeeze them into a small area of the field, but now is the trigger. Now we have to go hard, all right, because of that player's body position to receive it, all right? So the next pressing trigger is poor first touch. All right, we saw a little bit of that in the last. The poor first touch was caused by his body orientation, and that caused the defender to put pressure on him. So, but that wasn't necessarily the trigger. All right, and this one, it's the poor first touch of the player receiving the ball. So we go here. The ball's in the air again. Look, nobody's pressing right now. They're just putting pressure. They're just watching to see what happens. You see those two players? They're the closest to the ball. They're just looking at to see what happens. All right. Oh, now there's a bad first touch. You immediately see both of them start to go. All right. So we have that immediate chase to pressure the ball after the poor touch. Before he took the first touch, they weren't pressing, even though that ball was in the air. All right. Now we start to organize. All right. We see 3 players active. All right. And we win the ball back. So again, that poor first touch was the trigger. Prior to it, they weren't doing it. Now we see a player. Okay. He's going to look at his head's down. He's going towards the corner. So again, this is a trigger for us to say, hey, we can go press this again because we don't have the ball. All right. That would be a counter pressing moment because Red Bull just had the ball and then lost it. All right. So that would be a counter pressing moment. That initial phase was different. All right. So the next one, ball carrier slow or uncertain of his or her action. So they receive the ball. And how you've seen this a lot, I'm sure. You've been the player in this position. You get it. You've got some time and space, and then all of a sudden you're looking around going, I have no idea what the heck I'm going to do with this ball. All right. That would be another trigger. All right. That could cause us to press. All right. Well, again, we'll see this clip a little bit later for a different reason. But look, they're not pressing yet, but he's kind of slow in what he wants to do. All right. And you see that the Red Bull, they've done a good job of denying him any forward passes in that area. So now their 9 starts to come across recognizing, hey, the ball carrier doesn't have anywhere to go, all right? And so now we start to organize our press, all right? Now we start to organize the press a little bit more, all right? He really doesn't have any great options, all right? The 9 has forced him to go wide, all right? Secondary defenders stopped him from going central, all right? Deep supporting player looks, he's anticipating where the ball's going. Again, they've got great structure and organization and better numbers, all right, which allows them to win the ball, all right? So again, when that central defender received the ball from the goalkeeper, he just hesitated, looked up, didn't see any options. That's when we started the press. When he went forward initially, we didn't press him, all right? We waited until he was too slow and didn't have any options in front of him. So isolated or outnumbered ball carrier or player who is receiving the pass. This is another trigger, all right? So they might be wide open, but they don't have any options around them, all right? Another one is a player is related. A player is trapped on the line. So many times we'll get the ball and we'll see the fullback on the touchline is open and we'll give the ball to that player, all right? But they're isolated again. They're on the line so that you can use the line as an extra defender, all right? So that would be another cue that we want to press. And to be honest, balls out wide to the fullback or to the wingers is usually a pretty standard pressing cues for most teams, all right? So we see NYFC's in possession, all right? They've done a good job of forcing him into an area, okay? This player is running away from the ball, so he's no longer an option. So this player out here on the touchline, he is pretty much the only option with the ball if we want to play forward, all right, which he's pretty committed to at this point. So now we see, okay, there's one player, he's on the touchline, he's isolated, all right. These Red Bull players have done a good job of blocking off the path centrally, so now we can step to the ball because we know his only option really is to keep the ball, all right, and now we can go in with the idea of are we going to win the ball, we're going to destroy the ball, all right, because they've already made him predictable. All right, so that player on the touchline is isolated, not a lot of support. That's a trigger for us to go and press. All right, pass play to a predictable or targeted area. So every team might have a different area. All right, I was talking with Coach Jesse earlier. He likes to force inside. All right, so their targeted area might be there. All right, generally speaking, they might force inside and know that when it's played into that space, that's where we're going to go press. All right. But as a group, we know when the ball is played into this area of the field, that's where we want to go. All right, that's when we're going to go press. So you'll see this is Mexico, Brazil again. All right, and you'll see Mexico is pretty content right now. They're not pressing. It's just pressure. They're fine. No problem. They've got their organization. All right, they've got their shape. Now, this is the pass. You see immediately a change in the tempo. So clearly the ball to the fullback is their trigger. And that's when they press. Again, just a second clip here, same thing, same game, and it becomes a pattern. You see it over and over again. Happy to allow Brazil to just have the ball. A little bit, starting to squeeze her a little bit, all right? As soon as so playing into that wide area, the Brazilian center back starts to dribble. That's the cue that we go put a little bit more pressure. All right, and again, Mexico wins the ball in that area. So we'll go back one more time. We'll just see the difference. All right. So when we switch the ball here, see the Brazilian center back's not dribbling out wide really. She's a little bit, but not at any kind of speed. Your body orientation is just out to that fullback. The forward doesn't really need to press, all right? But this is when we go and win the ball. Ball's played into that fullback. In the next clip, just a subtle change. First touch. Is a little bit wider, all right? And the forward is a little bit closer. This forward here is a little closer. So she's going to make sure that she continues to go wide to make it predictable. It goes into that pressing area, and you can see the wide midfielder in the 4-4-2 from Mexico is immediately sprinting into that area because she knows it's going to go there. All right, that's the pressing trigger, and then the forward has helped her out a little bit by making sure the center back almost had to play the ball out to the fullback from Brazil. So this is Nate's rule. All right. I mean, we all have this rule, but this is the donkey rule. All right. Many times either know your opponent or you watch your opponent for about 10, 15 minutes in the game, and you can see that defender does not want the ball at his or her feet. Or if they do want it, they're awful. All right. And so that's something that we need to pick up on in games. All right. And that can be the pressing rule. Nate calls them the donkey. All right. Press the donkey. So I told you to remember a player. All right. Or I've not broken this down, but see if you can see who the donkey is. All right. And we're going to watch this one clip. I think this first clip, we do actually break it down a little bit. All right. This is a longer one just because we're going to count. Look at this player. He looks to the left and he's like, oh, hold up. I got it. Nope, nope, nope. You're not going over there. Because that guy on my left, he is not the donkey. There's the donkey. I'm going to make the ball go out wide. All right. So that's very clear and intent. And we remember this clip a couple minutes ago. That center back is not real sure where the heck he's going to go with the ball. All right. Didn't even think to go back to his goalkeeper again. Oh, as soon as the donkey gets it, here we go. Let's press. Let's press. And what happens? Oh, they lose the ball again. Oh, it's donkey time. You see the urgency of the 9 to get out there to squeeze. Again, panic, gives the ball away. All right, here we go. Here's our friend again. All right. Doesn't really have a lot of ideas. And there's that long ball. So even when he tried to do something different, he's really not very good with the ball apparently, because that's his right foot, which you would think, or his left foot with his stronger foot. So that was the ball they played. So clearly for NYFC, their left center back was the donkey. And that's who Red Bull said, hey, he can have the ball. And when he got the ball, we have to make sure that the ball stays with him and he doesn't have an opportunity to play it to somebody else who might be better with the ball. All right. So just some clips here. If we want, we can just roll through them. None of these are broken down. We just see this actually isn't the pressing one. I might have some of these in here. Here's a good one. So this is a pressing one. See, press, force it out wide here. And they stay with it. Now they just reorganize, right? They weren't successful. I mean, they were successful and they didn't allow them to go forward. They weren't successful in that they won the ball. So they just reorganized for a minute. All right. A little bit of impatience there. And we're forgetting, hey, can we keep them to one side? So that's a good example of not well executed press. All right. They had them trapped on the sideline and they let them out. They had them trapped on both sidelines and they let them out. All right. This would be a good example where we're trying to press, but we talked about security. So we see the back line of the U.S. making sure that the ball doesn't get played in behind them. All right. So a good example of the press being broken. Ball's played backward. Up. Good job to keep it to one side. Up. We see a press again. All right. And we're confronting. So the press eventually wins the ball. Is the press always going to win the ball back close to goal? No, unfortunately, it's not. All right. And you see the U.S. involved in some counter pressing right there. All right. To win the ball back. Ball backward. All right. So we see immediate chase. All right. Players facing the wrong way. Players getting involved. Mexico, everybody collectively moving. All right. Now the press is broken. We didn't win the ball back, so we just need to reorganize. See, Mexico is focused on getting their shape back. They don't have their shape yet, so we don't press. Even though that's their fullback getting it, one, the fullback's not as high up the field, and two, Mexico did not have their shape at that point. So we're not going to go press when we're not in shape because the chances of us getting caught being unorganized are really, really high. Now, ball's played to that fullback. Now we're going to press, all right? And now we're successful in winning the ball back. The same thing, Mexico, very indirect press right now, all right? There's the press. You see the speed that they're closing down. Collective movement. The fullback sees that the ball is most likely to go out wide. All right. You see Brazil in a counter press right now. See if they're successful in keeping the ball. Yep. So good organization. They kept the ball wide and they're able to win the ball back. next to, again, counter pressing. All right. So those are just a few clips without any diagrams. So that is basically it for today. I don't know if Nate wants to, or Jesse. You were quiet that one, Jesse.
I'll chime in on
it. I kept waiting for moments, especially when I brought up the pressing centrally.
Yeah. So I'll bring up one thing. So sometimes, you know, when we're at St. Kate's, we have our opponents, you know, we'll decide to press based on, maybe it's a scout report, maybe an assistant coach watched them play, and we know there's a couple players that they're not confident on the ball. So whenever they get it, we're going to press them. We're going to make that player make a bad decision. Other times, maybe the scout report, we know that there's a specific build out pattern. So we're going to try to disrupt it. We might tell the team, hey, don't press the first two. Let's just see it. And then we'll go ahead and press after that. Sometimes we tell them, you know, do not press the entire first half. And then maybe it's the second half where we come out and we see if we can just give them something different. But for us, when we do a scout report, I put a box around the player, you know, versus identifying like that, who the donkey is. But you gotta know where your odds greatest. Sometimes it isn't a scout report. You don't know, right? But pressing is a tool. And I always tell players, you know, in the first couple of minutes, as you watch them build out, what are the body, like what types of body language or cues can you pick up on that say, hey, this is their pattern, or this is the player to pick on. So sometimes, you know, the center back comes out and they just look nervous, right? They're looking around frantically, head all over the place because they just don't know what to do next. And that's typically, it's like, okay, that's body language. That person's not very comfortable with the ball. Let's keep the ball on their foot, right? Let's make sure we close down all their options. And I want that player to try to make the decision to get them out. So those are tricks, you know, as forwards or mids that you can pick up on, you know, in a game. How confident do they look on the ball? Are they even asking for it? You know, are they checking their shoulder before they receive it? If they don't, probably a player you can pick on. So those are just a couple little tiny tips, maybe as a player within a game you can kind of pick up on. And then the last thing, the other one we talked about is arrive on their touch. So when you are pressing, and you saw that in a lot of videos, it's, yes, we're off the ball, we're central, we're clogging seams, we're watching that ball come out. And then as that pass is traveling, I need to make sure I can close them down on their touch. So that player can't even get their head up. And now they're going to make a mistake. So we really emphasize that, like, if we're going to press, it's timing is your best friend. You know, if you're getting there at the right time, you're going to force mistakes, right? They're going to think they're open. Next thing you know, there you are, right? So, no, those are wonderful clips. And I think pressing is something you got to understand, whether your future, you know, whether it's we're going to press force wide or force central. You know, I'll explain why we go central. My thought is the opponents, the back four is opened up really big and there's gaps everywhere. Most patterns, you know, you want to get the ball to your fullbacks who can get higher up the field. I kind of like the ball on the center back's foot because typically they're there to maybe break apart plays and not the best in terms of playmaking. So we want to draw them out. So I let the center back dribble a little bit. And as soon as they start dribbling a little higher, we're going to pick on them. And if I can win the ball back in the middle of the field while everyone's pulled apart, then hopefully there's a gap. I can get to that goal faster. So it's just a theory. You know, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then we say, hey, force wide, trap set wide. This is not on today. But as long as you know those concepts, you know, you can trap set particular zones, particular people, particular moments. That's all I got, Joe.
No, thank you, Jesse. That was a good point. That arrive on the touch one is good. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think there's no wrong, well, I mean, there is a wrong way, but like, if one coach tells you they want to press this way and they explain the who, the where, the when, the why, the what, all right? If they explain all those things, all right, and your team can accomplish them, that works for that group. All right. If another coach comes in and says, we're going to press in this way that's a little different or radically different than the way that you understood pressing or have understood pressing at that point, That's not necessarily wrong. All right, everybody has their own way. You know, Jesse talked about forcing out, forcing in. I would say that probably realistically it probably changes for most coaches, because in the initial build out phase, I would say we forced wide, all right, to the fullback, because that player tends to be isolated on the touchline. Their options to pass are different. But then there might be times where we want to actually force the play in at that point. All right, so we forced it wide to the fullback, and then we force it in. All right, so there's definitely times, and then when you get closer to your goal, all right, obviously you're not probably really pressing in that moment. All right, you're more of just defending, but you probably don't want to force the play inside as you get closer to your goal. You want to force it wide again. So I think to say what's black and white, it's always this way. I mean, if I want to force wide, but the player who is the defender who is closest to the player receiving the pass, if she's in a better position to force in because of where she's at on the field, then I'll say, hey, everybody else on the field has to recognize that our teammate is in a better position right there to force in, and we all have to react accordingly. So I think it's important to understand that you have to have the principles in place, right? So you can have some rules, but rules are sometimes meant to be broken. So we can't say, well, that's the rule, it has to be that way all the time. I think that's where you can get into some problems. I think it's like, hey, if we can do this, this is what we would like to do most of the time. And it might change on situation. I remember playing a team, this is probably like 8-9 years ago now, but they played a 4-4-2, and they overloaded one side of the field, and we kept forcing out. And at halftime, one of the players came and said, hey, I think we need to force in, because it's forcing them away from their numbers, because they're trying to overload and put more players on one of the flanks. And we were just like letting them go out there to where they had more numbers than we did. And we talked at halftime. We're like, yep, that's how we're going to do it from now on. Even though we generally forced out wide most of the time, we talked for 2 minutes at halftime. This is why we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. This is who needs to be involved in it. And that's what we're going to do this half. And it worked. The game changed because we did that. So you can't have this set in stone mentality that there's only this one way to get the job done, for sure. And sometimes if you're waiting for the coaches to do it, we can't see certain things. Like, you're on the field playing, you can see that a defender does not have a left foot way easier than we can a lot of times on the bench. So you might tell your teammates around, hey, let's force him onto his left foot and let's squeeze him that way and press him, because he doesn't want anything to do with his left foot other than to stand on it when he kicks the ball. So, you know, those are little things that you can change as players on the field and make an impact without having to wait for us to stand up on the bench and shout and scream and whistle or whatever it is. We, you know, gyrate all over the place with hand signals, thinking we're like Jose Mourinho or something like that. You know, you guys can do that on your own. So I think that it's important that you take some ownership and can see some of those ideas of what might work. Like I said in that example about the 4-4-2, that was a player who came off the field and said, I think this is what we need to do. And she was 100% right. That was like my first point at halftime, but she said it. So, okay, OG, you just go ahead and say it. You tell the team that, because you're living it. I'm not living it. I am, but not the same way I'm living it on the field.
I'll emphasize that one point though. I shot my 4, 5, and 6. So center backs holding mid. It's like you have the best eyes on the field at that moment. You know, it's okay to change, to deviate from the plan. You know, let's force this play for whatever reason. You know, they might be the ones to tell you, or when do we engage it? Sometimes it's a cue. It's predetermined when the pass goes to this player. And other times, you know, sometimes it's like the holding mid might say, look, we're not, you know, wait for us, because we can see that the whole team is in a good space, in a good position collectively. And then we'll say, okay, go ahead and press on the next one. So I always challenge like center backs, holding mids, like what you see is a very important tool when you are pressing, and then what you communicate to your teammates. So it's got to be short. It's got to be sweet, you know, just quick, short and sweet, and get the information out there. And if it's not working, you got to be able to just say something, because Joe's right. We're not going to see, we can't see all of it from the position you're in the field. You'll know, you know, if it's going to work or not.